In 1943, a farmer's widow in rural Nagano Prefecture lived on less than 10 sen a day for food. She kept her 3 children fed on a single clay pot of something she made from the forest floor, and that meal is number 7 on this list. A schoolteacher in Osaka's Tennoji ward spent the equivalent of 2 yen a month on her entire kitchen. What she stretched it into is number 4. Number 2 was something grandmothers brewed from what most people swept off the path and threw away. If you've ever eaten through a hard season and kept going, this list is for you. Subscribe and let's count down 10 meals that held people together when everything else was falling apart. Number 10, kayu, rice gruel. Rice, water, salt. Bring water to a slow boil. Add whatever rice you have, even broken grains, even the dusty bits from the bottom of the sack, and let it go soft and loose, stirring now and then until it breathes like porridge. It tastes like warmth in its plainest form, faintly sweet, thin enough to drink, with a smell like a kitchen that still has heat in it. During the war years, Japanese households were rationed as little as 330 grams of rice per person per day by 1944, and many received far less. Grandmothers in farming villages across Tohoku would stretch a single cup of rice into a pot that fed 5, thinning it further each day as supplies ran lower. Kayu was the last thing between a family and an empty table, and they made it beautiful anyway. Number 9, dried sweet potato. Sweet potato, sun, time, nothing else. Slice the potato thin, lay the pieces on a flat stone or a reed mat, leave them to the autumn light for several days until they shrink and toughen and turn a dull amber. They chew like leather at first, then release something close to caramel, dense, fibrous, genuinely sweet in a way that felt like a gift in a year when sugar had vanished from most households. Sweet potatoes became a wartime staple after rice rationing tightened. A single sweet potato might cost 2 or 3 sen at a rural market in 1943, almost nothing and yet carefully spent. Women in coastal Ibaraki and Chiba prefectures dried them by the basketful in autumn and rationed them through winter, 1 or 2 pieces at a time. To eat one was to eat something your own hands had made from almost nothing, and that mattered. Number 8, acorn flour dumplings. Acorns, water, salt, sometimes a little wheat flour if any remained. Crack and shell the acorns, soak them in water for days to pull out the bitterness. Dry them, grind them against stone until you have something that looks like rough flour. Then mix it stiff and roll it into small round shapes and drop them in boiling water. They come out gray-brown and dense, tasting of the forest. Bitter at the edge if you didn't soak them long enough, earthy and filling in a way that stuck to your ribs. Families in the mountain communities of Nagano and Gifu had eaten acorn foods in lean centuries before, but the war years brought that knowledge back urgently. There was no price for acorns because you gathered them yourself, which was the point. Grandmothers who remembered the old ways became essential again, teaching daughters and daughters-in-law how to leach and grind what the trees offered. The knowledge had nearly been forgotten. The war made it necessary. There is something that happens when a kitchen goes quiet. Not the silence of a peaceful morning. The other kind. The kind that comes when the people who used to fill it are gone, or rationed, or far away. During the war years, millions of Japanese women cooked alone or near alone, feeding children while husbands were conscripted, while neighbors disappeared, while the news grew worse. Cooking under those conditions isn't about recipes. It's about deciding every day to continue. That decision is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, but it is one of the most human things a person can do. Number 7, substitute bread from acorns. Acorn flour, water, salt, and sometimes a scraping of soybean paste. Mix the flour into a stiff dough, press it flat, and cook it against a dry iron pan until it browns on both sides. No yeast, no rise, just flat and dense and hot. It doesn't taste like bread. It tastes like something that wants to be bread, which in 1944 was close enough. Wheat flour was heavily restricted by the mid-war years. The government's rationing system allocated civilians a fraction of what they needed, and substitutes became a matter of official policy and personal ingenuity in equal measure. Women in Kyoto and Osaka, cities where Western-style bread had briefly become fashionable before the war, adapted what they knew to what they had. This was not nostalgia. This was refusal. The refusal to let hunger be the last word. Number 6, pumpkin and salt miso soup. Pumpkin, water, salt, a small amount of miso, sometimes dried kelp if available. Cut the pumpkin into rough pieces, simmer in water until it softens, add the miso at the end, and let it dissolve without boiling. The broth turns a pale amber, the pumpkin goes buttery and sweet, and the miso underneath it is just enough to make the whole thing taste like a meal rather than a remedy. Pumpkin, kabocha, was encouraged as a civilian crop precisely because it required little care and kept through winter. A single kabocha might cost 5 sen at a wartime market. Grandmothers in Hokkaido and the northern Tohoku coast grew them in every available patch of soil, stacking them under eaves like small orange lanterns against what was coming. It was a humble soup. It was also the one hot thing in a cold house. Number 5. Tofu lees, okara, rice. Okara, the solid remains left after pressing soybeans for tofu. Mixed through cooked rice, sometimes with salt, sometimes with a scraping of soy sauce. Mix the okara through the rice while still hot. Press it together if you like. Eat it as it is. The texture is soft and slightly grainy, filling in a way that plain rice isn't, with a faint bean smell that clings to the pot. Tofu shops in wartime cities like Kyoto and Hiroshima would sell or give away their okara. It was a byproduct, technically waste, and families who had connections to a tofu maker were quietly fortunate. A measure of okara could be had for almost nothing, sometimes traded for a few matchsticks or a handful of salt. What had once been considered animal feed became, without ceremony, a meal, and the women who made it brought the same care to it they had always brought. We don't talk much about the economics of cooking through scarcity. Processed food, even now, is designed to feel easier than the alternative. And when you're tired, or grieving, or just done, that ease can win. The women on this list didn't have that option. They cooked from the forest, the field, the byproducts nobody wanted. Not because it was romantic, because the alternative was not eating. There's a quiet strength in that. In choosing the harder thing, the slower thing, the thing that asks something of you, it's worth remembering. Number 4, daikon radish soup. Daikon radish, water, salt, sometimes miso, sometimes a few dried sardines if the family had them. Cut the daikon into thin coins, simmer in salted water until translucent. Add miso or whatever seasoning remained. Eat it hot. The daikon softens completely and the broth takes on a faint, pleasant sharpness. Plain, clean, with a smell like winter root vegetables pulled just before a frost. Daikon was one of the few foods available in quantity through the worst rationing years. A large daikon could cost as little as 3 or 4 sen in a farm market, sometimes traded directly for labor. City families who could secure them were grateful. The schoolteacher in Osaka mentioned at the start of this video, this was her meal, most nights, in the winter of 1943. She taught geometry in the morning and came home to this in the dark. Number 3. Boiled peanut leaves. Peanut leaves, water, salt, sometimes a few drops of soy sauce at the end. Gather the young leaves before they toughen, blanch them in boiling salted water for a few minutes. Drain, dress with whatever you have. They taste green and slightly bitter, not harsh, just honest, with a texture somewhere between spinach and something wilder. Peanut cultivation was expanded by wartime agricultural campaigns in western Japan, particularly Chiba and Kanagawa prefectures, and resourceful households learned quickly that the plant gave more than its fruit. The leaves cost nothing. They were part of what you grew, used in full because discarding any part of food was something no one could afford to do. To eat the whole plant was not innovation, it was attention. Number 2, corn cob soup. Corn cobs stripped bare, water, salt. Break the spent cobs into pieces after the kernels are gone. Drop them in a pot of water. Simmer for a long time until the water turns faintly golden and sweet. The broth is light, almost translucent, with a gentle corn sweetness that seems improbable, given how little is left on those cobs. Corn was grown in the northern regions, Hokkaido, Akita, and nothing was left unused. The cobs, which most people today would throw away, yielded a broth that could extend a meal when there was nothing else to extend it with. Grandmothers who made this rarely called it a recipe. They called it using what you had. The difference matters. There is something almost ceremonial about making food from what everyone else discards. A corn cob, a peanut leaf, the pressed out remains of a soybean. These women were not celebrated for this. There was no audience. They stood at a fire or a small gas burner in a cold kitchen, and they made something from nothing, quietly, and then they fed people. That is a form of love that doesn't have a better word for it. Number 1, pine needle tea. Young pine needles, hot water, nothing else. Or sometimes a small piece of dried citrus peel, if it could be found. Rinse the needles, pour near boiling water over them. Let it steep until the water turns a faint green gold. Drink it slow. It tastes sharp and resinous, clean in the way that cold air is clean, like something from deep in the forest that found its way into a cup. Pine needle tea appears in historical accounts of civilian survival across Japan's mountain regions. Gathered in winter when almost nothing else could be had. Brewed by grandmothers in Nagano and Yamanashi who had learned it from their own grandmothers. There was no market price because no market sold it. You went outside and picked it yourself in the cold, and you came back inside and you made something from it. That act, going out, coming back, making, was its own kind of answer. This week, make one of these. Just one, not all 10, one. Pick the daikon soup or the kayu. Set a place at the table, not the couch, the table. Eat it without your phone. Eat it slow enough to taste it. Then come down to the comments and tell me, if you had to choose between the pine needle tea and the corn cob soup, which one would you make first, and why? These meals survive because someone refused to stop feeding the people they love. That refusal, quiet, daily, unglamorous, is what dignity looks like.